Welcome to my weekly podcast, Later That Same Life. I'm Larry Fedoruk, sharing thoughts, opinions, and stories from our lives.
Season 4, Chapter 8.
Lexicon.
Lexicon.
Lexicon is the vocabulary of a person, a language, or a branch of knowledge. English would have a different lexicon than, say, French or Urdu. Doctors have a different lexicon than lawyers or the military. What always amazes me is how quickly a new lexicon is added to our brain with each major world event. They aren't necessarily new words, although sometimes. They aren't a glossary of terms that we have to stay up late and study just to understand what's happening. No, usually they are just words and phrases that come up and start getting repeated over and over and over, and before you know it, we're dropping them into conversations as if we knew what we were talking about. Each major news story comes with a lexicon. Let's take the 3 big news stories over the last few years, the big ones. The ones that eat up all our time and attention faster than vultures on a desert corpse. They are Trump, COVID, and the war. Trump, COVID, the war. That's our last 7 years. It was like stepping into a bizarro world, a kind of parallel universe, where many things looked and seemed about the same, yet suddenly day-to-day existence was very different. Let's start with Trump. Get it over with. A lexicon came with him for sure. The big one? Make America Great Again. Make America Great Again. Let's call it what it is. A dog whistle to every racist, white supremacist, bigoted, misogynistic, gay-bashing Neanderthal who liked it better when people of color, women, gays, and other deviants knew their place. That's their great America. That's what Make America Great Again means to them, what it has always meant, and it's what Trump intended it to mean. But apparently, stringing 4 words together was beyond the intellect of many Trump followers. So Make America Great Again got shortened to MAGA. MAGA entered the Trump lexicon. I actually prefer MAGA because it's ridiculous sounding and meaningless, and it's just 4 letters. So, you can have fun with the word. MAGA. Make Alberta go away. Manitobans are going apeshit. Morons are getting applause. Monkeys are good assistants. Mothers against green apples. Well, you see what I mean? You can just go on and on. The lexicon of the Donald. What else came with Trump? Well, witch hunt, hoax, collusion. Again, not new words, but they just kept coming up. Trump got so caught up in repeating these terms to make a point. He almost one day coined the term witch hoax.
This had nothing to do with collusion. There was no collusion. It's a collusion hoax. It's a collusion witch hoax. I don't collude with Russia.
Of course, he misspoke, but I would have loved for witch hoax to have caught on. It's a witch hoax. Drain the swamp is Trump lexicon, as is alternative facts. That came up first from Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway in 2017.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Do I have to state the obvious? There's no such thing as alternative facts? Maybe, just maybe, but I doubt it, she meant added facts. Like if I say A, B, and C just happened, and you say, yeah, but did you know the D, E, and F also happened? Added facts. Not alternative facts. It's called getting all the facts. the whole story. The Don put the con in Lexicon, and the big one, his Lexicon legacy will be fake news. Fake news used to mean a fake newscast, like Weekend Update. Not the real newscast, just a parody or satire. That got shortened to fake news, redefined and co-opted by the Trumpers, convoluted to mean any news that didn't favor Trump and his agenda. Fake news. Man, hoax, witch hunt, alternative facts, fake news, and of course the big lie. What is it like living in that world day to day? Well, it's called Mar-a-Lago, and there's a pool and 24-hour catering, so it can't be that bad. The emperor secluded in his castle, surrounded by toadies and jesters. Also, the big lie as a term came from CNN to describe Trump's claim that he won the 2020 election. It was stolen. It's not Donald's term per se, although in typical Trump fashion, he lies, and then when confronted with the truth, he calls that the big lie. How does this guy even have a following? Sadly, I think we know how. There is a joke my dad was fond of telling when I was a kid. A dumb guy walks into the house with a big pile of dog shit in his hand, and he says, "Look what I almost stepped in." Oddly, I thought of that joke when I was watching the American inauguration in 2016. COVID came with a massive lexicon. Makes sense, given the importance and relevance to the planet. Right out of the gate, we got coronavirus, then COVID, then pandemic. You mean epidemic. No, pandemic. If you think about it, only a couple of years ago, we all had to learn or relearn that word. Pandemic. Then there was just an onslaught of language. Self-isolation, social distancing, PPE, masking, N95, incubation period, asymptomatic, super spreader, flattening the curve, ventilators, mandates, restrictions, passports, vaccines, clinics, the poke, boosters, variants, anti-vaxxers, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, mRNA, long haulers, hand sanitizers, Zoom meetings, capacity limits, cohorts, daily death tolls, hospitalizations, long-term care homes, and curbside pickup. Not to mention the global supply chain, which was not only a problem unto its own, but all tied up in our messy world. And think about it, as I went through the list, there's not one word or phrase that you had to look up, that you didn't know what it meant. No, because we learned the new language, mostly in the comfort of our own homes, only a few short, easy lessons per day. And now you can speak COVID. Lexicons, like the one that came with COVID, are necessary. It's part of our survival, communication, so that we're all kind of speaking the same language. They come from the situation in which we find ourselves, i.e., medical crisis. And the lexicon is shared through social media and traditional media, which mainly includes, of course, the news. News loves the lexicons. They love to get on these terms. Sometimes they invent them, and they just repeat the heck out of them. They're like the military, each event has to have a name so that we can create a cool graphic. We need that title, and then make it a part of the lexicon so that the troops will understand. It's a throwback to the newspaper days. A good headline sells more papers. Putin's war. Russia invades. Crisis in Ukraine. What do they say? Christ is in Ukraine? No, crisis. Okay, yeah, that's still a big one. But that other one would be a hell of a story, too. Which brings us to the war. The lexicon of the war story includes World War III, 'cause what's happening is pretty bad. But at least it's not World War III, not yet. It's interesting to me how if I make a comment on something about a military strategy or whatever, someone will always say, "Hey Larry, what do you want to do? Start World War III?" No, I do not want to start World War III. I have never aspired to that. When I grow up, I'm going to start World War III. No, I'm simply chatting with friends on Facebook. I didn't realize that itself could start World War III. Notice, too, that when people type World War III into a comment, they're very conscientious about using the Roman numerals, because that is the tradition we started with World Wars I and II. We really should keep that going. It's like the Super Bowls. I don't know why we started this Roman numeral thing, but I guess now we got to kind of keep it going. We're stuck with it. World War L-I-V. World War Live? No, World War, it's Roman numerals. And why does the next big one have to be World War III? Couldn't it be World War 2.0? How about World War IIb? Addendum A, paragraph 1. Well, it can't be, because the term World War III has an historical connotation, one that strikes fear. Politicians are fond of using it to make the case for or against it. Speaking of which, an unexpected part of the war lexicon this time around is Churchillian, or Churchillian, depending on how smart you want to sound. Of course, this means like Winston Churchill, a great leader, a great wartime leader, a great figure of history. And people have begun to compare Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to Churchill. I have no problem with that. He certainly seems a brave and able man, and it's really no time for petty arguments about whether he's Churchillian or not. Time will tell. Plus, the news has said that he's Churchillian, so now they got to do their best to make it so. Churchill did and said a lot of great things. He is a very quotable individual. One of my favorites, wartime Churchill. If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. Churchill. Anyway, back to Zelensky. You know that we need to put our faith in a hero. The script always needs a hero. That's our limited scope. And of course, there are millions of heroes on the ground in Ukraine. But we need that one, and it's Zelensky. I do admire him. He stepped up. Remember the old saying, some men are born to greatness, some men achieve greatness, others have greatness thrust upon them? And by the way, that's not verbatim, but that's William Shakespeare. That's right, William Shakespeare. Pretty quotable himself. Bill Shakespeare. Willie the Shake. The one and only Billy Shears. Zelensky seems like the latter. Greatness thrust upon him. Maybe in a half a century, he'll become part of a lexicon. Why, that guy is very Zelenskyan. Could be. What else is in the war lexicon this time around? No-fly zone. That's the one where you got to be really careful, because you don't want to start World War III. NATO also back in the lexicon. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's got 30 members. And by the way, that includes Turkey. Hey, we're in the Northern Hemisphere, and, we can access the Atlantic, Black Sea, Mediterranean, turn left at Sicily, straight at Gibraltar, and we're right there. Okay, you're in. I guess the world uses the same cartographers when they defined the West. They put Europe in the West. How are you part of the West? I mean, I don't mind. Welcome to the club, but you're the West? Where's the line? Asia, I guess. If you're looking at a flat map of the world on a page, but the world is round. It's a ball, it's a big blue marble. It's a sphere, it's a globe. In parts of Asia, it's easier to go east to get to the west than it would be to go west all across the east to get to the west. Well, Ukraine is not part of NATO. That's obviously one of the big issues. But countries who support Ukraine's freedom can send Ukraine defensive weapons. This is part of the new language. Defensive weapons. So I get it, okay? Personally, you get a knife or a gun or a club, and you're going to use it just to defend your home and your family. You're not going to go out and randomly attack people. But in wartime, what exactly is a defensive weapon? A gun that doesn't fire unless someone shoots at you first? A missile that only deploys after a tank blows up your hospital? Is the West militarily supporting Ukraine in this war against Russian invaders? No, we're just sending them defensive weapons. Now, the West did also send defensive items, helmets, bulletproof vests, etc. But defensive weapons, the sender doesn't get to classify or designate the purpose of the weapon, only the user. Thanks for the defensive weapons, Western comrade. But now, if you don't mind, I'm going to go out and hunt some Russians. Here's another term that the news kept repeating and repeating that sounded rather ludicrous to me. Very, very sad, but ludicrous. Humanitarian Corridor. We learned about that. It's like a hallway of niceness. Can we have a whole building? Maybe a few rooms? No, you just get a hallway. A humanitarian corridor. Of course, the term refers to a safe pathway to freedom, where civilians, citizens, children can run to safety without fear of being fired upon. Apparently, this was too much to figure out for both sides. It didn't work that well at all, and people died. Humanitarian corridor. Don't care for the term. A horrible last resort of war. This is actually an aside from the Lexicon topic. But there is a part of me that's glad that day-to-day cooler heads prevail. That people of authority, world leaders, people of influence, have made this a priority and are meeting to discuss the best and smartest way forward. How often after something have we said, why didn't someone think this through? Well, these are people trying to think this through. So that's good. But there's another part of me that says, another meeting? Really? Because, in Ukraine, almost the entire citizenry of a small town have been having a meeting in the basement of a church, 24 hours a day for 12 days, trying not to be killed. That's their meeting. They got to be thinking, this is how our meeting is going. How about yours? Well, you don't want to start World War III. This actually leads me to one of my favorite terms that we've heard so much of lately. Sanctions. Sanction is an interesting word, because it can have opposite definitions. A sanction can be both a punishment and a permission. You got to know the story in order to know which way the word is being used. The UN has sanctioned Russia over their invasion. What do you mean? Did they give them the okay, or are they punishing them? Well, of course, punishing. They've issued sanctions. Well, I sanction your sanctions. Fight the good fight. Keep up the good work. And of course the question arises, are sanctions enough? You don't want to start World War I. I heard one expert say, and this is true, the West has never in history issued such strong economic sanctions on a country so integrated into the global economic system. Sanctions on Iran are one thing. Sanctions on China's friend Russia, with 850 McDonald's locations, quite another. By the way, with enough social shaming and moral outrage, a lot of companies have pulled out of Russia, stopped doing business. They'll take a big hit in doing so, but I'm confident that they will pass those savings on to the Western consumer. Well, those are just a few of my new faves in the war lexicon. I spoke Ukrainian fluently as a child, and sadly, over the years, I've lost the language. I can still make out certain words and phrases, but once you start talking faster, I have no idea what you just said. Did you say the war is at your doorstep, or the tractor needs a new carburetor? I even took Ukrainian grammar in high school as my second language, so as a result, I never learned French. One time I thought it'd be cool to learn Spanish. You say adios, and I say hola. Hola, hola. I don't know why you say adios, I say hola. Point is, I consider myself functionally unilingual, except for lexicons. It seems that every so often, we all have to learn a new language just to survive.
Later That Same Life is written, produced, and voiced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk, 37 @gmail.com.